Hi everyone, welcome to JavaTechie. Whenever we think of microservices and distributed applications, the first point that comes to mind is security. Obviously, in distributed architecture, it is really difficult to manage security as we do not have much control over the application, right? So in this tutorial, I'll guide you how you can secure your microservices using API key based authentication. Okay, so without any further delay, let's get started. Let's assume I have two microservices, student microservice and course microservice. Now to maintain security, the first necessary condition is to restrict direct microservice call for outside callers. All calls should only go through a single entry point. So if you can remember in microservice architecture, we usually consider API gateway as an entry point, right? So in microservice architecture, all requests should first intercept by API gateway. Next, API gateway should route that incoming request to corresponding microservices based on mapped URL. Okay, let's say user send request with /student, then request will redirect to student service. Similarly, if user will pass /courses, then the request should redirect to course microservices. This is what typical workflow of API gateway in microservices world, right? So here, while routing the request, API gateway should authenticate and authorize the incoming request made by external callers. So this Spring Cloud Gateway should take that responsibility to authenticate and authorize the incoming request. Now let's understand how we can authenticate and authorize incoming request using API key mechanism. We'll use something like API key and service ID mapping. If you can see this below JSON structure, I have defined a key and with that key we mapped multiple services here. So you can consider this key as a API key or gateway key, and these are service ID or route ID which will be unique for each microservices. Okay, so if user is giving this particular API key as part of header, then he will able to access student and course microservices. Similarly, if user is passing this API key, then he can able to access only course services. Okay, this is how we need to maintain API key and service ID mapping in our application. Now you might have a question, where will you keep this API key and service ID mapping information, right? So here you have many options. You can use any in-memory database, but in this example I will use Redis NoSQL database. Okay, no worries. If you don't know how to work with Spring Data Redis, already I covered this concept. Just go to my YouTube channel and search the keyword with Redis. You will find this tutorial. Okay, I will share the link in video description so that you guys can refer it. Now I hope you got the complete context of how you can map the key and services. Okay, with a single key, how you can map the multiple services. We are going to implement the same in action. We'll create two microservices, student service and core service. Then we'll create another project, that is Spring Cloud Gateway, and there we'll implement the security. Okay, so let me go to my IntelliJ IDE. So already I created two microservices, student service, and there is another microservices which is course service. So I didn't write any complex logic in each microservices. To make it simple, I am just returning hardcode course object with this endpoint. Similarly, if you will go to the student service, I also return the couple of hard-coded student object with this particular endpoint. Okay, so these two API is good. One exposed on 8081 and another exposed on port 8082. Now the main feature which we are going to implement, will write a new Spring Cloud Gateway project and will implement the security over there. Now let me go to the Spring Initializer. Then I will just create a new project. I'll just change the group as a com.javatechie. Then artifact, I'll just name it Spring Gateway Security. Okay, so I'll just change the package name here, com.javatechie security or something like that. I'll use the JDK8. Now let me add all the required dependency. We'll add Spring Web. We are going to write it using the Spring Web Flux. So I just need to add Spring Reactive Web. Okay, then I just need to add the Lombok. Then I'll use Redis. Then also I need API gateway, right? Spring Cloud Gateway. Now let me generate this project. Now let me go to that directory and let me import this particular project to my IntelliJ IDE. Go to IntelliJ IDE, then I'll just click on File, Open. Then let me go to the desktop, JavaTechie code. Then just scroll down. This is what the project, right? Spring Gateway Security. Just open it. It may take few seconds to download all the latest version of dependency because we just added 2.6.4 of Spring Boot, right? So let's wait it to complete. So you can see here project imported successfully. It downloaded all the latest dependency. Let me minimize this. Now go to the pom.xml. Okay, so this is what the cloud version. Okay, so what is the parent version? 2.6.4. So let me downgrade it to the 2.6.3, and also this 2021 0 and 0. This is what the cloud version I'm going to use. Better let me add the dependency properly. Okay, I already have the template. I'll just add it. So just one additional dependency I added, that is Redis. To work with the Redis, we just need to add this dependency. Apart from that, everything is same. We just added the gateway, we just added the webflux, and the cloud version I downgrade to the 0.0. Okay, so this is what the pom.xml with the correct dependency hierarchy. So first, let me create couple of packages. We'll go step by step. So I'll just go to the src. I'll go inside main Java. I'll create a package called config. Okay, not file. I just need to create a package. Click on package. I'll name it config. So inside this config package, we just need to enable the Redis configuration. Okay, now I also need to add a filter which will intercept my all the requests coming to the API gateway. So I will just name it filter. Okay, then also I want a DTO which will be my API key class, who will contains the API key ID and service ID, list of service ID. So I will name it DTO. Then also I need one kind of util class where I can define the constant, I can define the utility logic. Okay, so I'll just write util. That's it for now. First, let's begin with our DTO. We'll just add the JSON structure here. Okay, so I'll just create a Java class API key. So if you can remember, in this API key, this is what API key class we need to create, and we need to add a gateway key, and we just need to add list of services inside that. So for that's the reason what I'll do, I will just create a variable here, private string. I'll name it key. You can name it gateway key or anything else. And then I just want to add private list of string. Okay, then this will be my services. Because okay, let me input this. Because for a specific API key, I just added the wrong Java util. Okay, because for a specific API key, we can map multiple services. Since I added Lombok, I can directly use the annotation at the rate data, at the rate all argument constructor, at the rate no argument constructor, and also I just want to add equals and hash code. I will also add toString. Fine. Now we need to store this API key in our Redis cache or Redis in memory database. So for that, first let me configure the Redis configuration here. Okay, I'll just create a class Redis config, something like that. Then already I configured Redis in my tutorial, so I will just add a live template here. Also I will share this GitHub code with you. You can just reuse the code. Okay, so I will just add the live template, something like Redis configuration template. Already I created this. So what I'll do, I'll just add the annotation here at the rate configuration. Then this is the environment came from the Spring framework. I'll just input all the required statement. Okay, so I can directly use this. Okay, fine. So we imported all the required statement. Now the Redis connection factory will be up and running on the port which is specified in your application.properties file. Okay, so let me enter this so that you can see this. Okay, we are just adding the two property in our application.properties files, which will be spring.redis.host, spring.redis.port. Okay, so these two configuration we need to add in our application.properties files, because we are just trying to customize our Redis connection, nothing else. So I will just add these two. So let me copy it directly from here. Go to your application.properties file, just add it, port which you can specify. Let me remember 366379, or yeah, you can customize any number. Okay, I will just give the default number which will be 6379. Now also I just need to specify the host. For now I will specify the host as a local host. So I will just specify local host. Now we configure the Redis here, right? So you can start the Redis server from your system, but before that we also need to add a Redis hash component so that we can store this API key information in this Redis component. Okay, so what I'll do, I will just create another class, new Java class. I'll name it Redis hash component. You can give any name, guys. Okay, so here I will just annotate this at the rate component. Next, you can also annotate here at the rate SL4J, which will come from the Lombok. Okay, so you can directly use the log statement directly. Now what I need to do, I just need to inject the Redis template here. So what I will do, I will just write private final Redis template. Then I will specify the type generic, which will be key as a string and value as a object. So I'll name it Redis template only. So I can directly use the constructor here. I can do control enter. I'll just add the constructor here. See, it's up to you. If you want, you can directly use the @auto_add here, and you don't need to add any constructor. But this is what introduced in Spring 4.4.3, I believe. I'm not sure about the exact version. This is what the you can use. You just add a field and you can just create a constructor. If you have multiple constructor of a same class, then you must need to auto add it. Okay, this is one of the advantages of Spring 4.3. Now what I need to do, I'll write few method where I will save the API key details to the Redis, what I can say, Redis in memory DB, and also I want to fetch. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll just write a method public void hset, any name you can give here. Okay, here what I want to save, I just want to save the string which will be API key. I'll name it key. Then also I just want to say something like hash key, which is nothing, your router ID or service ID. You can give any name, guys. Okay, hash key. And also I just want to set the object, which is nothing, your API key object. Okay, so I'll just name it value or something like that. Now to save it, I can directly use the redis template dot oops for hash. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll just use redis template dot for hash, and here I can add it, right? I can call the method put, and I can pass these three objects. Okay, but I don't want to pass the raw object. I just want to maintain a JSON structure, something like this. Okay, how I can achieve that? I can directly use the map. This is the key and this is the value. Again, this is the key, this is the value. So I can directly use the map here, right? So for that, what I will do, I will just create a util class who will take this particular object and will convert it to the map data structure. So for that, what I will do, I will just create a Java class. I will name it something like mapper utils or something like that. Okay. Then there is annotation in Lombok. I can use the utility class. If you will define this annotation at the rate utility class, all the method which you will define by default, it will be static. Okay, you don't need to define the static keyword manually. So what I will do, I will just return a type generic. So I can define type generic. Fine. Then I will just name it object mapper or something like that. Object mapper. Then give the object which you want to convert. So I will give it object because I don't know the data type of it. And then I will define the expected class type. which will again type generic. So I can give it something like content class type or something like that. Fine. Now here how I can convert that using object mapper. So I will just create a object of object mapper. Mapper, okay, it is suggested new object mapper. Okay. Now here what I'll do, I'll just return mapper dot convert value. Fine. I'll just give this object and then to value type I will specify content class type. That's it. Okay. Now here what I'll do in this Redis as component, rather than directly store this particular object, I will first convert it to the map, then I will directly store it in the Redis template or Redis in memory DB. So for that what I'll do, I will just use a object of map. I will not specify any type generic here. I will name it something like rule hash or some hash value. Then I will just use what is the class name we created, mapper utils. Mapper utils dot, you can see here I'm directly getting the method name object mapper. Okay, if you observe I didn't define this as a static, but this is what the advantages of use this annotation. Now let's go back to the code, and here I'll just give the object which is nothing, the value object. Okay, value, and you are expecting it as a map data structure, so I'll just use map dot class. Now it will give you a result as a map. Now I can put that to the in memory Redis database. Okay, so how can I push? I can give key, then hash key. Instead of value I will pass this rule hash. Fine. This is one time setup, guys. You just doing the set value to the Redis template. That's it. And I am just converting it to the map and adding to the Redis so that I can get this particular hierarchy. Now next I need to fetch from the Redis template. So what I can do, I will just write a method public who will return me the object get something like that, because hash get and hash set something like that. This is what the standard. You can give any name, guys. That's not an issue. And what you want to get based on the key, right? String, you can pass the key, and also you can pass the hash key of it, which is nothing, your route ID or service ID. So I'll give it hash key. Fine. How we can get it directly? Okay, remove this. We can directly get it from return Redis template dot oops per hash dot get. Give the key and hash key. Fine. Now also we need to write a method to check whether there is any entry present in the Redis in memory DB or not. So for that I will just write a method public who will return me the list of object present in my Redis database. I'll just return type list of object. I'll just check h values. Okay. I'll give the key. Based on key, whether is there any record or not, it will just give us the result. I'll directly use return Redis template oops per hash dot values per key. Fine. This is what we just set the value to the Redis template, check the value, if it is present return all the value, and just get the value based on the key and hash key, which is nothing, API key and your service ID. Guys, this one don't be confused here. This is what the key and service key. I will just add this particular hard coded value while start up my application. You will understand it. Okay. So we just created the configuration for Redis. So next what we'll do, if you go through the presentation again, there is some hard coded service ID which is specific to the microservices. For student service I define this particular service ID or route ID, right? Similarly for core service I define this. Similarly this is the same as core service, and this is what the API key. Now what I'll do, I'll just hard code this value in some constant file or some properties file. Okay. For now I will create one constant class, something like application constant, or I'll name it app constant. Fine. And here I will just define those hard coded key. So I have the template, let me add it, something like keys, yeah. So I just define this value, okay. Student service key for student service, or you can just, I will just add a comment here, service ID or route ID of student service, okay. Similarly, the second one is service ID or route ID for courses service. So you can just add like this, okay, course service. So these were the two hard-coded student service and course service key I defined. This is what you will generate dynamically, guys. For this particular demo purpose, I hard-coded some value, but you need to generate this using some algorithm logic or some hashing mechanism. Okay. For now, let's go with this hard-coded value. Now next, what we'll do, initially there is no key and value configured in our Redis database, right? So on application startup, I just want to add a key with the corresponding services like this. I just want to add a API key and corresponding services, similarly key and services. Okay. So for that, what I'll do, I'll just go to my main class. I'll just annotate here, or I'll just write a method here. First I just need to inject the Redis as template, right, or Redis has a component. So I'll just do Redis has component, because this is where we wrote the get set method, right? So I will use the same here. So I'll just use Redis as component, and simply I will just use @autoadd. Fine. Now I will just write a method public. Okay, let me minimize this. Public void init keys to Redis or something like that. I just give the meaningful method name. Fine. So here what I will do, I will just create a object of list of API key. Then what I will give it the name API keys equal to new array list. Fine. Now in this API keys, I just need to add few hard-coded value. So I'll just add it API keys dot add new API key. This is what the key for this particular key. Okay, let me input this first. What is the input statement for app constant? Okay, app constants. This is what the class name we created. Fine. Okay. Now here, if you observe, we are telling to the Redis take this key, and with this key configure service ID of these two microservices, student service key and course service key. Again, with this API key, just configure only course service key. That is what we created the object of API key, and we are adding a list of API keys inside that. Okay. Fine. Next, what we need to do, we just need to check in the Redis in memory DB whether is there any key configured. If not, just simply add it. Just check in the Redis has component dot h values whether is there any value or not based on the API keys. Okay. So rather than hard code this API key, since I defined it in a constant, I can directly use that app constants dot record key. Okay, which will return me the list of object whether it is there or not. Even though it is not there, it will just return me the empty lists, right? So I can name it list. Then here I will just add a check if list dot is empty. If there is no record, then just loop it and add it in the Redis in memory DB. So what I'll do, I'll just iterate it API keys dot for each. Okay, then get the object. I'll just simply add it in the Redis as component dot hset. Okay, here you just need to provide the key, which will be nothing, the record key, means this is what the constant. Okay, let me copy this. Then next you need to provide the hash key, which is nothing, the API key. This is what API key. Okay, so how I can get that? This is the object I have of API key. I can directly use k dot get key. Fine. Then I can just pass the complete object of API key. This is what I'm just adding here, guys. So this is what I just want to execute at the time of application startup. So I can simply annotate here @ post construct. at the time of application startup, I just want to configure these API key and corresponding microservices, service ID and route ID to the Redis in memory DB. That is what the intention of this particular method. Now the next step, we need to define the router in our API gateway application. So if you go to the PPT, if the URL is coming with /students, then redirect that request to the student service. If it come with /courses, then redirect it to the course service. So this is what router logic we need to write here. Okay, so we can create a separate class, but for now I will add it in a main class only. So just write public route locator. Okay, then I'll name it something like custom uh, route locator or something like that. Fine. Then I need to pass the argument as a route builder. Okay, route locator builder. So I'll just give route locator builder, then just give the name. Okay, I'll just annotate this @bin. Then here what you need to do, you need to write return builder dot route the request. Okay, then just route, see this routes because it can route to multiple requests. Okay, that's the reason builder dot routes. Now route this request to the what I can say, you can map the endpoint as well as the service ID. If with a specific API key and the service ID, if it mapped to this corresponding ANT matchers, then forward that request to the corresponding microservices. Okay, something like that concept. So let me show you app constant. Okay, app constant dot, I'll just add for the student service, then next we'll add for the course service. If the route ID is student service key, and then if the path which is coming @path is slash, what I will give, API slash student service slash star star. Okay, then just filter that request, filter that okay, give me a second, just filter that request and pass it to the URL. I will just specify here. Okay, f dot prefix, just pass it to and specify the URI, which is nothing, http localhost 808081. Okay, and then just build it. So you can remove this and you can add it here. That is fine. Now I don't want to build it because I have another service which is course service. Now to cross verify, let me show you student service is hosted on port 8081. Okay, that is what I just give the correct host and port. Similarly, rather than build it, what I'll do, I will just remove this for now. I'll just add another route statement for student service. Just paste it. Okay, and now this is for course service. Just add it and just specify the URL patterns here. Now the if request is coming with /API /course service, then redirect that request to 8082 where my course service is up and running. Now I'll simply build it. That's it. Okay, let me format this code. So you can format this as well. Fine. So this is simple statement, guys. This is what also we used in our traditional approach, Spring Cloud Gateway. If you remember, there we configured in our application.yml file. And here I am just writing the custom router with the specific ANT matchers, or you can say with the patterns. If the service ID, student service key, and if the URL is coming with this particular endpoint, then redirect that request to this. If the route ID or service ID is core service key and the path is API core services, then redirect that request to this 8082 server. But before redirect, we want to authenticate that particular request. We also want to authorize that particular request, right? So how we can do that? before routing any request to the API gateway and API gateway route it to the corresponding microservices, we need to intercept that request, right? For that, we can create a filter class. So just write a Java class. I'll name it auth filter. Fine. Then just annotate this at the rate component. Okay, this should be capital component. Then also I just want to add SL4J from Lombok. Then extend this or implement this class from something called global filter. If you observe, this came from the Spring Cloud Gateway. Okay, it means first the request will be intercepted by this global filter, then it will go to your API gateway, and also specify the order. Fine, add it. Now you just need to override the methods filter and get order. So in the get order, you can specify the something like order. Okay, dot, it is a enum, so I'll just give lowest precedence. Now in this filter you need to write the actual logic to authenticate and authorize that request. Okay, so before we authenticate, first let's get the API key or gateway key from the header which user will pass. So how I can get that? I can specify a list of, I can directly get it from the exchange object. Okay, so I'll just list of string, then I'll name it API keys header. Okay, then I will just get it from exchange dot get request, then get headers, then I will just give the key to get it. The key or the header key which you are going to pass, that is gateway key, you can name it. Okay, the same you need to pass as part of your request header, gateway key. Just add a semicolon. Now I also just want to log it, log.info. I'll name it something like API key. Then I'll just something like I'll just add a I'll just return this API key headers. So I can do in this way, right? I'll just specify this and I'll just rename it API key header. HE. Okay, there is a spelling mistake. Fine. I'll just copy this. I will add it. So from the request, you'll get the API key, which is nothing the gateway key. Now next step, you need to get the route ID or the service ID from the API gateway. Okay. So if you'll go and check the main class which we wrote, because as part of request, we are also giving the service key. Even though you are not passing as part of header, but Spring Cloud Gateway know the service ID because we only configured with the URL, right? So that we need to get here. Okay. So how I can get it? There is a logic route, get the route. It should come from the Spring. Okay, let me get the proper route. Fine, get the route. Then you can get it from exchange dot get attribute. Okay, give the attribute name server web exchange util, some class is there, server web exchange. Okay, this is the class dot, you can use this gateway route after. Okay, so once you get the route object, then you can get the route ID, string route ID equal to, you can directly check if route object not equal to null, then you can get it from the route object itself, right? Otherwise you can return the null. Fine. Now we just need to validate if route ID equal to null. Okay, or user is not giving any API key as part of header, so we can write something like collection utils, okay, dot is empty API key header. Okay, next, see, this is what we are checking, whether is there any router ID or not, whether user is giving the API key header or not. If user is giving these two, okay, let me go back. If user is giving these two field, then we just need to authorize that request. Okay, So to authorize that request, what I will do, I will just write another private method who will authorize the request. Private boolean is authorize, authorize. Okay. Now how I can authorize? Based on the route ID and API key. This is what the information we are giving here, right? API key and route ID. So I can just pass the argument string route ID string API key. Fine. So with this information, I will just check in my Redis component, or sorry, Redis in memory DB. I will check with this API key whether there is a record or not, or there is a service map to this API key or not. If it is there, then this particular request is authorized to access that particular microservices. Okay. So for that, what I will do, I will just need to inject the Redis has component. Redis has component. I can simply auto add it. Fine. Just add a enter, and then I can write that logic here. So I will just check the API key object. I will name it something like that. I will check in the Redis in memory DB. Okay, how I can check that? Redis has component. There is a method we define hget. Okay, we'll give the key, which is nothing the constant API key. So I will just give the app constant dot record key. Now give the actual key, okay, which is nothing the API key which we are passing as part of header. With this, whether there is any object present in Redis component, if yes, how I can build it? If API key object not equal to null, it means there is some record present with this key in Redis component. Then get that API key object, okay, key, and then convert that using the what is the class name we created, object mapper, something like that. Okay, let me check. Mapper util, mapper utils dot object mapper, give the API key object and convert it to the corresponding class, which is API keys. API key dot class. Fine. Now I'll just check return key dot get services dot contains the incoming route ID or not. Fine guys. Now if you see here, the route ID is nothing the service ID. Okay, I will show you the diagram again. The route ID is nothing the service ID. Here what I am checking in Redis DB or Redis in-memory database, I am getting the API key, enter API key object based on the API key, which is nothing the gateway key which will pass as part of header. Then I will just check the incoming route ID is present for this particular service or not, or the route ID which is mapped to this particular service with this API key or not. Okay, this is how we just simply authorized it. If it is correct, then return it. Otherwise, just return else, return false. Fine. So this is straightforward way to authorize it. Check the Redis DB, get the API key object. If it is there, then just check the route ID whether it is mapped to the listed services in the DB or not. Okay. Now what I'll do, I'll just check here or each authorize, give the route ID and API key headers, right? Get it dot get, give it 0 first index. Okay, if it is not authorized and there is no header and there is no route ID, then simply I want to throw a exception. Throw new, I'll give something like response status exception. I'll give the HTTP status, so I can give unauthorized, which will be 401. Okay, unauthorized, and also I just want to specify some message. You cannot consume this service, please check your API key or something like that. You can't consume this service, please validate your API keys. Fine. So I'll just return this exception if the user is not authorized, if there is no API key and there is no route ID. Otherwise, I'll just continue my uh, filter kind of thing. Okay. So I don't want to write any else statement, guys. I can directly return chain dot filter, give the exchange object, continue the flow. That is what. So this is what the actual logic to authenticate and authorize the incoming request based on the gateway key header which user will pass as part of request, and the configured service key for the student service and courses service. Okay. So I believe we are good now. We created filter, we just created the router. Okay, everything we created. Now what I'll do, I'll just start the student service and course service, then we'll try to access from the API gateway. So let me quickly go to the student service, let me start it. Parallelly, let me go to the course service, then I'll just start it. But before start this gateway security, since we are using the Redis, I just need to start my Redis server locally, right? So there is a command I can use this, but how we can use in Windows, that I already covered in this tutorial. Okay, in this tutorial we'll follow the same here while working on this particular example. So I'll just go to the terminal, I'll just start this Redis. It will take few seconds to start the Redis. Yeah, successfully started. Now let me see whether these two classes, these two services is up and running or not. Okay, student service is up and running on port 8081. Similarly, course service is running on port 8082. Okay, you can see here. Now we started the Redis and we added all the things. Let me cross verify. We added the Redis config, we added the hash component, we created DTO filter. Yeah, it looks good. Now let me start it. Fine. Let's go to the main class. Anything, let me cross verify. Fine. Now let me start this application. Okay. So I just want to add a debug point so that I can show you on application startup. We are adding few value to the few API key to the application. Okay. Or Redis component. Now also I just want to show you the authentication filter logic. Fine. I'll just show you here. But before debug, let's start in the normal mode without debug. Then we'll debug the code and we'll try to understand the flow. Okay, let's go to the main class. I will directly start it. Spring Gateway. It will default start on port 8080 because you didn't specify any port here. Okay, so let's wait it to complete. Okay, cannot access Redis client JD spool config. Here it is. Let me build this code once again. I'm not sure. Okay. Fine, it seems there is Java cannot access redis.clients JD spool config class file for Redis client. Okay, let's go to the pom.xml. We added the dependency JDs, right? Let me refresh this. Now let me start the application. Okay, so build is succeed. It started the application. So we added this dependency manually, guys, but we didn't re-import it. Okay, so this dependency or jar is not there in the class path. So it is starting now. You can see here there is something router predicate factory cannot determine local host name. Okay, yeah. So you can see here it started on port 8080. Now what I'll do, I'll go to the browser or I'll go to the postman. I'll create a new request, HTTP request, which will be get. So I'll just give HTTP from the API gateway. Now the request I will trigger to the API gateway. Okay. So I just need to provide HTTP localhost and API gateway is running on port 8080. And then if you'll go to the main class, let me minimize this. Go to the main class. Here you specify if user is giving this URL API/student service, then redirect that request to this 8081, which is nothing the student service, right? So I'll just give that URL. If I am giving /API/student service, then redirect that request to the student microservice and access the endpoint students from student service. So I'll go to the student service, the endpoint which we defined /students, right? I'm giving the same endpoint. So just go to the postman. Fine. I gave the same endpoint. Now in authorization, we just need to provide API key based authentication. And the header is something we configured in our filter. Let me go to the API gateway logic. Go to the filter class. The key which we are expecting to pass as part of request header is this gateway key, right? I will give the same gateway key. Now the key which we defined, if you will go to the main class, this is what the key we defined, right? If you will give this particular key as a gateway key, then you can able to access both student service as well as the course service. Fine. If you will give this, you can only able to access course service, not student service. We'll try both the case. Okay. Go to the postman and I will give this key. With this key, I can able to access both student and course. Now let me hit this endpoint. I am seeing the response from student microservice here, right? All the three student object which I added, I can see here. Now with the same, I just want to try to access the course microservice. So I will just change the URL. See guys, if you see the URL for the accessing the course service, this is what the API gateway URL. Now go to your course microservice and get the endpoint from there as well. Go to main class. This is what /courses. Okay. First, you need to provide the URL from API gateway. I will give it okay API/courses course service. Okay. Then the URL from the course service is this. Go to the postman and access this. Now I will click on send. I can see all the result from the course microservice as well. It means the gateway key which we are giving is applicable or it configured these two services, student service and course service using the route ID or service ID. Now if you'll check with this particular URL, is this particular API key I can able to access only in course service. Okay. Now what I'll do with this particular API key, I'll try to access student service. Then definitely I'll get 401 unauthorized access. So let's verify that. Gateway, I will give the header this and I want to access student service /students. Fine. Now if I'll click on send, I'm getting 401. Okay. Because this API key is not mapped to the student service key and I am trying to access it from the request from the API gateway, right? Now the authentication filter will validate it and it will throw you the exception. So to show you that, what I will do, I will just stop this and I will run it in a debug mode so that I can show you before request coming to the Spring Cloud gateway, it will intercept by auth filter and it will authorize that request. Okay. So I'll just add a Now let me go to the main class as well so that I can show you an application startup what are the value it's populating to the Redis in memory DB. So I hope this concept is clear for you guys, right? There is nothing to demonstrate further. Give the valid gateway key and access your API. For this valid API key, you need to configure the service ID. That is how we configured here, right? For this student service and course service, for this course service. Fine. Now let me debug this. So the request starting should come to this init key to Redis. Okay. It will take few seconds. So since this will execute first because we annotated post construct which will work as a init method. So let me show you the debugging statement. So in this API key we are adding new API key of this and we are giving the service key or route key. Okay, so let me show you here directly. I will directly resume this. I will show you the API keys here. Now if you see in this API key, let me evaluate this. If you'll see, we have API key this, and we configured the ID of two service here, right? One for student service, one for course service. And this is the API key. This is what the ID or service ID or route ID for student service. Now we manually added these things to API key object, and that API key object we are inserting to the Redis database. So I will just resume this. There is nothing to debug. Now this value will set in our Redis database. So once application will start, I will show you the statement for auth filter. Okay, it is started. Now what I'll do, I will go to the auth filter. Now I'll send the request. Okay, so this is the not happy scenario request, because we are giving the API key. With that API key, you can't access the student service, right? With this API key, you can only access the course service. So I'll just send the request. In the auth filter, I will show you from the API key header. From the request, I will get the API key header, and I will just log that. You can see this is what my API key. Okay, and I will also try to get the route ID. Okay, now if you see the route ID, let me show you the route ID, which is nothing, your service ID. You can see here, this is the service ID. Now this service ID is for student service. So if you will verify it, the end is BUD. Okay, go to the main class. You can go and check in app constant. Correct, this is for student service. That is what we are giving here, guys, right? We are giving the student service URL. Request will goes to the API gateway. From the API gateway, it will get the route ID, and it will pass to the header. Okay, let me go back. Fine, it will get the route ID. Now it will check if route ID equal to null, and if there is no API key header, and if it is authorized user. So these two conditions will pass, because we are getting the value from the header, right? Now it will go to the is authorized statement. So let's move the cursor. Here it will just go to the Redis database, and it will just take the API key. You can see this is what the API key we are giving, right? Which is the gateway key as part of request header we are passing, and it will fetch from the database, and it will check if there is no object, but we have the object here. The statement is true here. There is two object. You can see here, key this and service this, right? Now just go next step. You'll get the API key object. Fine. Now with this key.get service, which will give you the list of service ID with that particular API key, we have only one, which is course service, and what you are giving is different one. So you can see here, guys, right? This is the different, and what is there in my key.service, API key.service is different. Let me show you. This is completely different. So it will return false, because see, I'll show you once again. If we'll go to the main class, for this particular API key, you can only access the core service. But with this API key, I am trying to access, with this API key, this is the same which I shown you just now. I am trying to access student service, which is not authorized, we can say. Okay, because this is what this particular key is not for student service, it is for core service. Since we are hitting the URL of student service, you are getting the where it went. Let me go to the debugger statement. You are getting the route ID for student service, not for course service. Okay, and the from DB with that key, you found the service ID of course service. You can see here, this is for course service and this is for student service. That is completely mismatched. Here it will fail. You will get the throw statement directly. Okay, I will just throw it. Now if you will go and check, you will get the footnote one. So if I'll give slash course hyphen service and slash courses, you can able to access it, because the input gateway key, with that gateway key you can find the valid service ID or route ID from the Redis database. Okay, and it will be authorized to access that particular microservices. That's what we configured in our main class, right? API key and corresponding key of your microservices. So I hope this concept is clear for you. If you have bunch of microservices and you are interacting them using Spring Cloud Gateway, then in Spring Cloud Gateway itself, you can implement the security. You can use this API key mechanism, or you can use the JWT token based authentication. Okay, so let me know in comment section if you guys are interested to know how we can implement token based authentication in Spring Cloud Gateway. That's all about this particular video, guys. Thanks for watching this video. Meet you soon with a new concept.